May the words of my mouth and meditations of our hearts be forever acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. This is when we all get to go, because you can feel it building, can't you? It's getting more and more crazy out there. Grace, love, and the will of God, I feel aptly sums up the message of today's gospel. And this message is as relevant today as it was all those years ago. As I began my drafts of this message earlier this week, we were all in shock, and I think still are, at the thought that 2 young police officers could be shut down in their line of duty. We hear they were just doing what they loved, a routine day policing. It is obvious that in their short lives, and in the very short time that they had lived in that little community that they did, they had engendered a great love of them as people. I certainly know from personal experience, and I'm pretty sure many of you have done that thing where you leave a big city and you go to a small country town where you're going to provide public service. So long as you're open, that town will embrace you. And before you know it, those who are itinerant become good mates, part of the fabric of that little community. So for now, grace is needed to begin the healing that will take time. And many questions are being asked, some for which there may never really be proper answers. But to know that each and every life is precious. And what began as a new life, a baby, with a lifetime before them, was still imbued with the love of God. For no matter how long or how short that earthly life is. In today's gospel, we are confronted, as I'm sure Joseph was, with the fact that a new life, a baby, is coming into the world. Can be quite confronting, can't it? And I've said to the group from the 7 o'clock, you know, some of us it's a long time ago, for others it's not so long ago, but when you hear a new baby is coming, there's often mixed emotions. There's the excitement, there's expectation, but there's also fear and confusion and worry. And certainly this baby was coming into the world not conceived in a conventional manner. Nonetheless, no less able to be ignored. The baby was coming, was real, and was going to join this family soon. Imagine those mixed emotions, notwithstanding, of course, a visit from an angel. That also would throw you into a bit of a spin, wouldn't it? That Joseph would have experienced first, receiving the news that the woman that he was to be married to was already pregnant and not to him. Then, just as he thinks he's got it all worked out, we hear in the gospel, well, you know, he's a good abiding man and he'll put things away quietly and sort it out, keep it calm. Then he's visited by an angel, no less. Once this new message is delivered, Joseph again has a choice to make. And I think sometimes we forget that bit. It's a bit like Mary. You know, she was given a news from an angel that she was going to conceive a child. And yes, my Lord. Now Joseph is confronted in a similar way. This is going to happen. So Joseph actually had a choice. And once he woke up, he could have ignored that message and just kept on moving with his original decision. But, as we hear it in history, he chooses to listen to that messenger of the Lord and to take Mary and the child to be his, to look after, to care for, and to love. That is obedience. That's incredible obedience. Some might even say blind obedience. Trust. No one, as far as we know, would have even needed to know what Joseph had been told. But Joseph knew and obviously felt compelled to act according to the angel's instruction. Imagine the grace that it takes to carry all of that. Imagine the love expressed in taking Mary still to be his wife and to embrace Jesus as his own son. Particularly in those days in a society that was driven by shame and honour as a culture. To begin life with a questionable family pedigree, even to begin with, would be tough for all concerned. But of course, we all know that this was never going to be any conventional, ordinary life. This was a life that was created by God, by and for God's will. Now, most of you would know that by this stage, insert story from real world. And strangely enough, just this past week, God chose to reveal to me in a very real way that this same story of shame and honour being overcome by love still exists. That each life that God participates in is precious and deserving of grace. So, the other day, after I had arrived at work and assembled my visiting list for the day, along with dealing with a whole pile of other administrative claptrap, as I'll call it, I set off. And I decided for some odd reason, let's call it God willing, around the back way to the ward that I was going to. I wouldn't normally travel that way, but I did this particular time, and that took me in a different way than when I would normally do so. I was heading off to a patient who is what we call a frequent flyer, somebody I see on and off on a regular basis over many years, and my mind was on, I wonder what's brought that person to the hospital this week, and what was the conversation going to be like. As I walked down this long corridor at the back, near the gastrointestinal wards, near the endoscopy day theatre, which unfortunately far too many of us have experienced ourselves, and the time of waiting, which is a terrible time. And so I'm walking down this hallway, not unlike this, and of course I noticed a couple of patients wearing their very fashionable mauve gowns with no backs in them and trying very uncomfortably to make themselves less conspicuous as they were waiting to go in for procedures. And as I said, I was literally paying no attention really to that. I might smile at somebody or whatever. And I was walking along. And just as I got to where the path intersects, where they actually come to take the patients in for their operations, a young woman jumped up and literally stopped me in my tracks. There she was, standing right in front of me, and she was basically blocking my path. And she said, I have to confess everything to you right now. She was agitated and physically upset. And you can only begin to imagine the thoughts that were going through my head as a priest. Because I've had people confess before operations anything from murder to I stole some lollies from the shop. So, I was also very acutely aware of the surroundings in which I found myself: a public hospital, a public corridor, other people only seats away. Also aware that I can't take this patient anywhere because they're sitting here and they're about to be called by somebody for an operation. So, I wasn't able to offer my usual, I'll take you away, we'll find somewhere quiet, all of those things. Besides, I could see how urgent this was at this point. So, I took a moment and I sat the young lady down, and it's amazing how big you can become all of a sudden to block pathways and stop people from seeing and hearing, etc. And at the same time, I tried to explain my role and who I was. I had never met this person ever before in my life. The repeated statement came, I haven't told anybody about this, and I have to confess it all to you now. So I said, let's just take a breath and make sure that the patient understood what they were about to do. And out the information came, I'm pregnant. Great pause. Obviously, I wasn't looking surprised enough. And again, I heard, I'm pregnant and I haven't told anyone, and my sister's going to kill me and my mum's going to kill me. The full understanding hit me. This poor young woman was about to undergo an operation with an anaesthetic, and she hadn't told anyone, despite her being asked over and over and over again, are you pregnant? Is there any chance that you could be pregnant? Big signs up everywhere advising you to let the people know if you could be pregnant. And again, she repeated, I haven't told anyone. So I listened to her concern for her unborn child as she wrapped her hands around her belly. And then asked if maybe we could start to tell somebody else who needed to know. And at first, her fear was so great that she didn't think she could do that. So I offered to go with her. So we went, and we told. And eventually we were allowed to sit down again and wait for a doctor. And whilst we waited, the full story was divulged. A young woman sent with her sister to Australia as she was made to leave two of her own children, younger already, at home with her mother in Africa, to be cared for by her mum. Sent to Australia to find a good job, to make money to send home to assist with the raising of those two children already there. So, finding oneself with child, not in the best of circumstances, can certainly still be a frightening experience. It can fill you with such fear, even today, that you might initially rather not tell anyone. What's more amazing, awesome, is that it was the tiny little cross on my blouse that made this child of God speak to save her child. So, today, may the will of God give you all the grace and love that you need to feel God's great plan for you, whatever your life. Amen.